Ms. Lane is the first judicial nominee to receive a not qualified rating during President Trump's second term.
At today's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, the spotlight turned sharply toward former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, as Senator Dick Durbin delivered a pointed and highly charged critique. The moment wasn't just political theater. It was a window into the ongoing tension over how justice is applied, perceived, and sometimes politicized at the highest levels of government. Now, let's dive into the next one. Time to tackle the threat head-on. Let's see how it unfolds.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is the committee's first business meeting since President Trump fired Attorney General Bondi. In short, she did more damage to the Justice Department's reputation than any attorney general in history. In just over a year, Bondi transformed the department from the world's preeminent law enforcement agency into a weaponized political battleground, providing a shield to protect the president and his cronies and a sword to attack his enemies. But this was ultimately her undoing. She failed to successfully prosecute the president's enemies, and there are many, not for lack of effort, but because courts and grand juries blocked her baseless prosecutions. Now Ms. Bondi has been replaced by the president's former personal criminal defense lawyer, who in his first days as acting attorney general is doing everything in his power to placate his former client. Earlier this month, the Justice Department moved to vacate the seditious conspiracy convictions of members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers for their key roles in leading the January 6th insurrection. The president has a determined strategy to wipe off the face of the earth all evidence of what happened in this complex on January 6th. It won't work. Those violent extremists helped organize the violent assault on law enforcement in the Capitol building in an attempt to forcibly block the constitutional transfer of presidential power. We have witnesses who come before this committee who won't answer the question of who won the 2020 presidential election. They also gloss over January 6th as not worthy of comment. It was a moment I'll never forget as a person who served in the Senate and the House. This Capitol building represents more than just a building. It is a symbol of our democracy. It was physically, violently attacked, and the men and women who risked their lives, and some gave their lives in defense of this Capitol, deserve better than what we've seen from this administration. To add insult to injury, last week the Justice Department indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center. This civil rights organization has worked tirelessly to expose violent extremists like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, the same people Todd Blanche wants to give a clean slate. The Justice Department is trying to turn back the clock to the infamous days of J. Edgar Hoover targeting civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King. They brought this paper-thin indictment for one reason. The Southern Poverty Law Center has held accountable MAGA extremists who are allies of this White House. Just yesterday, the Department of Justice brought its second baseless indictment against former FBI Director James Comey. Now, I'm not a personal fan of Mr. Comey for a variety of reasons, but I will tell you this prosecution, personally ordered by the president, who despises Comey for overseeing the investigation of Russia's interference in the 2016 election, this indictment is laughable. I'm confident Todd Blanche's vindictive efforts will ultimately fail again, just like Pam Bondi's baseless prosecution of one of the president's enemies. The acting attorney general is also weaponizing the Justice Department against dreamers and those protected by DACA. These are young immigrants who were brought to the United States as children. Dreamers have grown up here, pledge allegiance to the same flag as all other American children. They are American in every way except for their immigration status. But last week, the Justice Department issued a shocking decision that puts dreamers at risk of being swept up in the president's cruel mass deportation campaign. In 2012, at the request of myself and our former colleague, Republican Senator Dick Lugar, President Obama established the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program known as DACA. This program protects dreamers from deportation and gives them the chance to contribute more fully to the nation they love. Hundreds of thousands have signed up for DACA. And when they do, and when they pay the necessary fee, they go through a complete background check, criminal background check, every 2 years. They go through this background check and receive a work authorization and are promised that as DACA recipients, they won't be deported. Many are working in our communities. They're teaching our children and grandchildren. They're doctors and nurses and small business owners, policemen and the like. Despite multiple court challenges, DACA is still in place, and the Trump administration is under court order from the Fifth Circuit to process DACA renewal and work permit applications. So what does the Trump administration think of this court order? They ignore it. Even the courts that have ruled against the program have recognized the disastrous impact of its termination and the significant reliance interests of DACA recipients and their families. But last Friday, the same Justice Department Board of Immigration Appeals issued a binding precedent decision that DACA will no longer protect Dreamers from being arrested and deported. This puts every Dreamer in America at risk. Mr. Chairman, this committee has the authority, the jurisdiction, and the responsibility to review this management of the immigration issue and to do something. I ask you, when you consider the schedule of hearings and the subject matter, we need to schedule soon, very soon, a hearing on the status of DACA and Dreamers in America. Thousands of lives are at stake. I also ask you to schedule a markup vote of S 3348, the Bipartisan DREAM Act that I have introduced. This legislation, which has been referred to our committee, would establish a path to citizenship for Dreamers. Now let me, if I might, make reference to your opening statement. 3,603. 3,603. That's how many licensed attorneys there are in the state of Montana. When you look at the person who has been nominated to serve a lifetime appointment to the federal district court in Montana, you wonder, couldn't the White House find one attorney in Montana to recommend for a lifetime appointment who has actually tried a case before a court? Ms. Kathleen Lane is not remotely qualified to be a district judge. That's not my opinion alone. That's the official rating by the American Bar Association. Ms. Lane is the first judicial nominee to receive a not qualified rating during President Trump's second term. There were many in the first term, but this is the first in the second term. As the ABA explained, its rating is, quote, based on issues with her experience, which is an important component of competence. The ABA found that Ms. Lane had failed to gain, quote, substantial courtroom and trial experience in the less than 9 years since she's admitted to the bar. Now, what contributed to that assessment? Was it political bias, as has been mentioned already? Not at all. The ABA detailed in their letter, quote, Ms. Lane has never tried a case as lead counsel, either civil or criminal. Moreover, quote, she's never conducted a direct examination, picked a jury, or offered an opening statement or closing argument in a trial. My Republican colleagues may claim ABA is partisan, but over the past year, the ABA has rated dozens of Trump nominees as qualified and well qualified. Not only has Ms. Lane's legal career been short, it's been extremely, almost exclusively partisan. She currently works for the Republican National Committee. She doesn't try cases, but she works for the RNC. She has repeatedly chosen to litigate politically charged issues. The record shows she's ideological and inexperienced. To think, 3,603 licensed attorneys in Montana, and this is the best we can get for a lifetime appointment? I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Graham on nominee Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very quick here. One of the most qualified people I've ever brought to the committee. I appreciate President Trump.
Durbin's central argument was blunt. He accused Bondi of failing to uphold impartial justice, suggesting instead that her actions were influenced by political alignment. His remark that she failed to successfully prosecute the president's enemies wasn't just a jab, it was loaded with implication. It raises a deeper question about whether prosecutors, especially those in high-profile roles, can truly remain independent in a deeply polarized environment. To understand the weight of this moment, it's important to consider Bondi's history. As Florida's Attorney General, she built a reputation as a staunch conservative and a loyal ally to Republican leadership, including former President Donald Trump. Her involvement in Trump's legal and political orbit has been well documented, from defending him during impeachment proceedings to speaking at major political events. That background is exactly why critics like Durbin question whether her legal decisions were ever fully insulated from political considerations. But there's another side to this. Supporters of Bondi would argue that Durbin's criticism is itself political. From that perspective, his comments could be seen as an attempt to reframe past legal outcomes through a partisan lens. After all, prosecutors make decisions based on evidence, legal standards, and discretion, not simply on who the enemy is. The idea that someone should be prosecuted because they oppose a president is, in itself, a controversial premise. This exchange highlights a broader issue that goes far beyond Bondi or Durbin. It touches on public trust in the legal system. When high-ranking officials accuse one another of bias or selective prosecution, it can erode confidence in institutions meant to be neutral. People begin to wonder, are legal outcomes driven by facts or by politics? Another layer here is timing. Comments like these don't happen in a vacuum. With elections always on the horizon and political narratives constantly evolving, moments like this can shape public perception in powerful ways. Durbin's remarks may resonate strongly with those who already feel that the justice system has been unevenly applied. On the other hand, critics may see it as an overreach, an attempt to rewrite history or score political points during a public hearing. What makes this moment particularly striking is how direct it was. Senate hearings often involve careful language and measured criticism, but this was more pointed. It reflects how much the tone of political discourse has shifted in recent years. Lawmakers are increasingly willing to speak in stark, confrontational terms, especially when discussing figures tied to controversial administrations. In the end, this exchange between Dick Durbin and Pam Bondi is about more than one person's record. It's about the ongoing struggle over accountability, fairness, and the role of politics in the justice system. Whether you see Durbin's comments as a necessary critique or an unfair attack likely depends on your broader view of how power and law intersect in American politics. One thing is certain, moments like this keep the debate alive, and they ensure that questions about justice, loyalty, and responsibility remain front and center in the national conversation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next content.